Joining me now is Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Josh Frydenberg, and here with me in the studio, the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary, Ed Husic. Now, I do want to go to these shirt front allegations, comments straight away. Ed, there was no shirt fronting, but the Prime Minister did have this meeting with Vladimir Putin. It was much anticipated. He's called on, by all reports, him to apologise and for there to be compensation. Is that good enough?
Those of themselves on any other given day would be appropriate calls to make. The problem is that everything leading up to this point, where you have to put this very critical set of requests forward, has been overshadowed by really clumsy terminology. Now we have the fact that the Prime Minister's words have been turned into parody, that everyone's making a joke about those words, and in particular the people that we have to deal with and put very forcefully a set of conditions about what should happen. So this has been a botched attempt by the Prime Minister to try and represent the very valid, very serious concerns, not just of the victims, but of all Australians who believe that what happened to that flight was horrendous and that someone should be held accountable to it. And it appears that Russia should be very much held accountable for it and should be doing the type of things that the Prime Minister has rightly put forward.
Josh Frydenberg, are you confident now that it won't overshadow the G20 summit coming up? And also that issue that Ed's addressing there, did the Prime Minister manage expectations? You know, he's been given these assurances from Vladimir Putin, but is there any recourse to actually make sure he keeps to his word?
Well, Tony Abbott has stayed true to his word to send a very forceful message to Vladimir Putin. He has told Vladimir Putin that Australia is in possession of information that indicates that the rocket launcher from which the missile hit MH17 came from Russia, then returned back to Russia. He has pointed out that the Americans, when they had taken out a civilian aircraft inadvertently, had paid appropriate restitution as well as making an apology. And he's also made the point to Vladimir Putin that we expect Russia to comply with Resolution 2166 of the United Nations to ensure that there is an unimpeded investigation of the crash site and that the perpetrators are brought to justice. These are very significant messages that he has put in a robust way, and it also reflects the fact that Tony Abbott has led the world in terms of a strong response to the downing of MH17. As for the issue of the G20 more broadly, I don't believe this will overshadow the G20. The G20 is primarily an economic meeting. We have a broad-based agenda led by our goal of getting a 2% increase in international growth over and above what is expected over the course of the next 5 years, and we have all countries signing on to that growth target. We have major plans to boost investment in infrastructure, to boost free trade between nations, and to strengthen the resilience of financial institutions, as well as ensuring that there is very limited profit shifting and tax base erosion. So we are moving in the right direction on the economic front. It's a critical meeting for Australia. 85% of the world's GDP will be represented by the countries in Brisbane, and Tony Abbott will be centre stage, Australia will be centre stage, and hopefully there'll be some very productive economic outcomes for Australia and for the world.
Okay, Ed Husic, just quickly on the G20, this is an agenda that the government has been talking about for some time. Do you share these goals? Is Labor one with the government on trying to achieve these outcomes, or does Labor see them as a bit lofty and heavy on rhetoric?
Well, we had obviously a key role in encouraging this to occur in Australia, because we believe that it would understandably, and particularly given our economic position within the G20 and the strength of our economy during times where others were not performing anywhere near as well, we thought that there were some important things that were worthy of getting on the table, and in particular that point about the way in which revenue bases have been significantly undermined by profit shifting and the way in which some multinationals game effectively the systems, taxation systems in various parts of the world that not only impact on government but also impact on the cost of doing business in particular countries where costs are held particularly or artificially high. So we believe on this that it is important that we as a nation speak as one in terms of pursuing reform. We're glad that the government has finally got to the table and recognised that, particularly in terms of profit shifting and addressing taxation revenue bases, that this is something that they do need to pursue. Their early record didn't look so well. I mean, they turned their back on over $1 billion on revenue that could have been addressed here. So we hope that it is a fruitful session, and I think it's important that, coming back to the other points, that we do use the occasion, even though the suggestion was made that, you don't use the G20 to raise other issues. Well, in actual fact, this is a particularly good avenue to raise with the Russians.
There'll be many other issues on the sidelines, and you can already see that from the protests. And Josh, I know that you're heavily involved, and the focus of the world will be on the G20 in Brisbane over the weekend. But allow me to move on. Ed Husic, I want to look at the renewable energy target. Labor has pulled negotiations. Why? This is exactly what the sector fears, doesn't it? Uncertainty.
I think what the sector is really worried about is billions being undermined by a massive cut to the target, and seeing all those jobs go and seeing investment move offshore. You go into a negotiation with the view that you're going to be flexible on both sides. We certainly were happy to talk with the government, but not on the basis that they would be steadfast in basically sticking to the cut that they want to do. Their argument is that electricity demand is falling, but in actual fact this is probably the perfect time to make some serious headway on changing the generation mix. And from our point of view, if you're not attempting to conduct these negotiations in good faith, then clearly there's no reason to pursue further talks.
Josh Frydenberg, on that issue, why is the government so inflexible here? Does it need to start considering this 40% cut that Labor's talking about?
We're not inflexible at all. We entered these negotiations with the Labor Party in good faith, and it's the Labor Party that spat the dummy and walked out of these important negotiations. I mean, Labor would much rather be part of the problem than be part of the solution. They're playing the politics,
let me just clarify then,
not the policy.
Josh Frydenberg, what is the deal breaker here? It seems to be that the government does want a reduction from 41,000 gigawatt hours to around 26 or 27,000. Are you not willing to move on that number, or are you?
Well, we have said that we want a real 20% target. And as you know, Laura, electricity consumption has gone down since the RET was first put in place by the Howard government. So we want a real 20% target. That is our starting position, and it's a negotiation. I can't understand why Labor is again dealing themselves out of the solution, and they are bringing great uncertainty to the thousands of people who are employed in the renewable energy sector. We're absolutely genuine about the RET. We're committed to a real 20% target. We want to have proper negotiations, but Labor's stuck in this no man's land between their green thumb and their blue collar. We have said we need to protect.
Isn't the government in a situation now where the status quo remains, the legislation remains in place unless you can change it? So that's really Labor winning out on what they want. The legislation staying, the 41,000 gigawatt hours remaining mandated.
But again, there was a mandate to review the RET. This is what has been undertaken by Dick Warburton. We have now settled our position, which is on a real 20% target, and we're saying to the Labor Party, come to the negotiating table. They refused to be part of the discussions on direct action. You've got Julia Gillard yesterday saying that the carbon tax is going to come back. You've got Mark Butler, their Labor Party spokesman on climate change, not ruling out reintroducing a carbon tax in an interview just a week ago. Labor's position is totally confused, and this is creating great uncertainty for an important sector, whereas we're committed to direct action. We were successful in getting rid of the carbon tax. Both were achieved without the Labor Party. We're saying to the Labor Party, now come and join us in trying to come to a real 20% target, and they've spat the dummy and walked out of the negotiations.
They're saying no at this stage. So will you look to Clive Palmer now for negotiations?
We're determined to resolve this issue. We'll talk in good faith to any party in the Senate. But Labor has had a real opportunity here, and again, they're playing the politics, not the policy. We're committed to the RET, a real 20%
That's just wrong.
target.
Like that's just
And-
wrong.
and
We're not
you've got
playing
to
the
come to
politics.
negotiations.
We're not, what we are playing
Is
at
there a political
is a
element
policy.
here? This would appear to have maximum impact as world leaders start to arrive for the G20 in terms of PR.
We are driven by a commitment to policy, a good policy outcome that would see us generate energy with less environmental impact and meet the needs of the country.
You've dug yourself out of negotiations now.
The other thing is that we have now been able to see, will ensure certainly in the short term that the target or that 41,000 gigawatt hours remains, but we're not prepared to see billions. I mean, for a government that's supposed to be pro-business, they are certainly callous about billions of investment, about thousands of jobs, and the ability for us to innovate and change the way we generate energy in this country. So, if they believe that that they should, in terms of certainty, put all that at risk, they should explain why they want to turn their back on investment and jobs.
Okay, quick break here on AM Agenda. We'll be back with Ed Husic and Josh Frydenberg.